hey, Gundam Maniacs! Welcome to the Gundam Explained Show, episode 115. Oh, look at that solo. If it wasn't for Steven, this music would not exist.
I love this.
Now, I usually have my script up, and I totally forgot to put it up. Yeah, the show's just a little bit late today because I had a bunch of work stuff I had to make sure to get done. But welcome to the Gundam Explained Show. It's brought to you by the supporters. So links in the description for the supporters supporting the show. Links if you're interested in doing any of that, and links to Steven's stuff because he's a big part of the show. I'm on his show on Wednesdays, so if you haven't checked that out, links in the description. Yesterday was awesome.
Yeah, it was a
Steven,
lot of fun.
yeah, Dirty Diggler.
It was so much fun that YouTube hit me with a guideline strike. They said, you can't have Dirty Diggler on your stream anymore. He is too spicy for YouTube. Now, fortunately, I did manage to get the stream is back up on YouTube. It's just demonetized. So, but yeah, enjoy that conversation because I think it was a positive talk, and I thought it brought a lot of cool tips for people, especially in the Gunpla community.
Yeah, no, because really cool guy. Because I known of him through Zionic Shadow, but I never really because I don't go on Twitch much, so I miss a lot of Twitch streams when people just stream on Twitch. He wasn't too active on Twitter, so I wasn't sure. But man, that conversation we had was awesome, especially someone that is, and this is endearing, but an older person, because like I feel like sometimes, getting into the hobby I am, there's not a lot of older Gundam fans, even though technically there would be because it came out in 79. So
Right, you would think that there would be a lot of older Gundam fans.
maybe just in Japan. So,
Right.
but
But no, I think it's cool that, like, a lot of the, New York Gunpla community look up to him, call him Gramps,
yeah,
so
I
and
know.
he leans into it, which is cool, so
I know, I loved it, and, yeah, I love because, anytime I meet it's just maybe a thing I do, and whenever I meet someone that I know is older than me, I feel like, okay, whenever they're talking, there's probably some wisdom, like, throughout. You never
oh,
know.
yeah.
Like, there's this and it's funny because there's this guy that, I was doing some consulting with, and I just assumed he was much older than me because the way he presented himself, things he talked about. Until we had a conversation where I found out he was younger than me, and that, like, blew my mind. Like, it's not a big deal, age isn't, but sometimes we use that as an anchor
Yeah,
for
I mean, it's
perception.
the Tominoism, right? Like, the wisdom of youth.
Yeah. No, that's okay, that's a good way to
But
put it,
no,
yeah.
it's funny because I think that, like, people choose to get wise as they get older, because I know a lot of older people that, maybe you probably wouldn't wanna take advice from them, but,
Yeah, that's
that's
that's true, and it's strange because even, like, I will without getting political, I can talk about Donald Trump, where I always found him entertaining, and then when he came
yeah.
to be a president, I was like, "Well, I don't know if he fits that mold, the inspirational, motivational mold as a president." And so it was a conflicting time.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
um, oh, Johnny Tacoma bringing up Barbados Rex. Yeah, that's the guy I've been following, especially when I was going down my airbrush phase. Like I learned a lot from him. Yeah, thanks, Johnny Tacoma. Yeah, I haven't done this in a while. King Dylan, Talos, Goose, Barry BB, Rami Bro, Rogue New Type. Good to see you all. Jamkel X.
Yeah,
Um,
good to see the usual suspects in chat.
and
Hope you guys are having a good day. I'm happy to be
yeah,
back in the co-captain's chair. I really missed
yes.
last week. I'm sitting in the chat and I'm like, man, is this what it feels like to be off the show again?
Great segue because I was actually going to bring something up about that, and good to see you, Gundam Wing. But you were saying how YouTube hit or did a strike on your video.
Yeah, yeah.
That happened with Talos's video. I had to get it reviewed in order to be
Really?
eligible for monetization, and and they reviewed it like, yeah, it's fine. It's like, what was it, that like Greek accent that came through? And they're like, what is this? Hate speech?
Wait a second. We can't allow this kind of content on our platform.
No, but that stuff's not a big deal. Like
I,
sometimes something will get demonetized, but it's not like the end of the world
yeah, I
at
mean, I
this
think
point.
it's fun, and like
Yeah.
that's why I talk about it. Is like I imagine that it's entertaining for people to kind of see this sort of inside baseball that you
Yeah.
and I kind of go through from time to time. My first I did an 8-hour live stream on my birthday a couple years back, and Bandai copyright struck the entire video because I held up a copy of
Oh,
Gundam
right.
versus Extreme. I forget which Gundam versus it was, but it was one of the Gundam
Maxi
versus
boosters.
titles, and it
Yeah.
was like 7 seconds of the box art on screen,
Oh,
and
that's hilarious that they, you
it's
know, and
yeah,
a lot of it is people that are, like, paid to look for that stuff and do that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
you could fight every single one really, but it's like, is it worth it sometimes? Because then it gets held up in digital
exactly.
litigation. I don't know. Yeah. But no, so today's episode is gonna be really cool. We're gonna talk about like in I don't know if it's proper advice, but financial advice when it comes to this hobby in terms of just being a collector, being a casual builder, maybe being a content creator. Like I think there's different levels where there could be financial advice with the hobby. Some things are justifiable, some things are not,
Yeah, yeah,
and
and I guess full disclaimer, like neither of us are financial experts. Please
yes,
consult your
exactly.
tax.
That's what I was like. I don't know if this it's gonna be really advice. Yeah, it's more of like it's almost like talking through that stuff because especially with Diggs yesterday, I was curious because of his experience, which another way to say age. Like I was like, how do you store your stuff? Like, because I'm getting to a place where I have no room, but I don't think I should be making room. It's more of like a personal thing. But then it's the same thing
Yeah.
with money. Like, there's people that are like, "Oh, you need to save for retirement, save." But sometimes I don't think that's necessarily like what you should do all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and, I think you and I were talking about this kind of in the green room beforehand, but, too few people, I think, are willing to really have honest conversations about that, and Diggs, honestly, is a good example because he came from being, like, a sneakerhead as well, which that's
Oh
an
yeah,
expensive
that's
hobby,
yeah.
it's like he has gone from and comic books, like, I used to collect comic books myself. I have a garage full of long boxes, and, these are expensive hobbies because you end up, over time committing lots of money to them, and I think that, if you're honest with yourself about what your collection is about, there are ways that you can kind of mitigate financial disaster
Yeah,
by
I
yeah.
feel like that's where the key is here. It's like leveraging what you have, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. And then there's some things I'll share, some things I found on the internet. Like there's new information on Requiem for Vengeance, just in terms of the mechanical designs, and then some uh, collectibles to show off. Speaking of, saving money, but I don't know if I will. Like, didn't you hook me up with $5 toward that Providence Fund?
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's what? 1% of the,
Hey, it's something. No, that's
put
but
that in a, short-term savings bond and
yeah,
collect when it's
I
matured.
actually that would because that's one of those things I tell you, like, if money wasn't an object, I would get that just on design alone, the look. But what I want to get into right now is Gundam stuff we've gotten into the past week. So for me, I was, watching that Gundam evolve, and this one was on Wing, and I found it to be very interesting compared to most episodes of Evolve. I felt like it was giving us action and lore at the same time. Um, and then what was the other? Oh yeah, the Advance of Zeta facts, because it's like Talos
Yeah.
and I are trying to figure out what is the best way to help portray information or communicate information on Advance of Zeta to kind of like build a foundation or a basis of then later jumping into the more advanced systems, terminology, mobile suit development. And it's like I wanted to kind of establish the world, with that.
Yeah, I think I really admire that you guys are tackling that because I don't think that there's enough content, at least in the English speaking world, on Advance of Zeta. And I think
No.
that most people really dig the designs. I mean, everyone loves those Titan suits.
Yeah.
Um, but
Oh yeah.
it's what's the story behind it? Why are there 11 million Hazels and none of them has like a different name to it? It's just
Yeah.
this is the Hazelanthally. How,
Yeah, I know, right? Like, and then it's pronunciations. That's like a whole other. It's cool because even Talos started a terms document that I can share later. So like where because there's so many terms in the Gundam universe that sometimes when I'm reading a wiki or reading some of his research, I can tell there's like a word or two that's supposed to be a concept
Yeah.
about something that I don't know. So yeah, that there's a lot of stuff to cover with that. Okay, so other than that, Goose, our very own Goose, sent over this.
Ooh.
Yeah. RE100, which I haven't done in a long time, but of Yune's Jack Doga or Yacked Doga. I think there's multiple ways to pronounce
I love the Yacht Doga, especially in the Gune colorway. That green and gold is just real slick. I do need to
it.
show off.
Oh.
I haven't revealed it yet. I'm going to reveal it on my next stream next week. But Goose did send me a care package as well. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to fit it on camera, but we'll see what happens.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember hearing about that. I'm curious to see what that is because 'cause I'm still finishing Xeonix, that he sent me that I'm gonna do a sponsored video for him of the, Red Rider.
Yeah.
Should be done with that soon, and I can't wait, like, I even got extra inspiration from yesterday's show about, like I love that concept he was talking about with the whole, a part of yourself. And I
Yeah.
think you've even brought that up too, like a part of yourself as the art in the kit, and that really it kind of motivated me because I already know what I'm going to do special with that Red Rider. Um,
Oh,
but once that's done, I'll get on this. And you brought up the gold, and I didn't think about that. Like, is I actually do like this yellow,
yeah.
but I wonder if I should get more of a yellowy gold to then replace all this because I do think the yellow still works. But I just like this kit because it's Xeon related, and I don't normally build a lot of Xeon stuff.
I
But
know
it
you
has a
dirty
lot.
fed.
Yeah, but I like the head, and it reminded me of what you're doing with the Bondoc Xeonic Shadow got you
Yeah. Speaking
having
of
that
sponsored
backward.
builds, let me see if I can get this to
Yeah,
focus on here. Um,
yeah, that looks awesome. 100%.
Yeah, this is pretty. I was very excited about this, and I love how similar in silhouette it looks to the Zazabi, which
Ah,
is really
lineage.
sells the
Love
Neo
it.
Xeon refit of the Bondoc. So I I mean I'm going all in on this kit.
I love
Not
it.
too far all in, I guess, because I was like, there's so many customizations I'd like to do, but I really just want to complete it.
Oh,
Not that I'm rushing, but it's like I don't want to get bogged down in, well, I need to sculpt these parts and I want to create a
oh,
whole new
okay.
piece of shoulder armor and all that stuff.
It's
I'd
that
like to,
thing again, we were talking about yesterday where sometimes you want it to be perfect, but you
yeah,
need to kind of be able to reel yourself back and really just enjoy the process and be okay with a mistake or two.
yeah, just like with like video game development, you run into these issues with
Ah,
scope creep where it's like, well,
yes.
maybe I could add like a climb mechanic, or maybe I do need to have crouch rolls and things like that. And it's like, if you clearly define what you want to do before you set out to do it and maybe allow yourself a little bit of room to wander, that's one thing. But once you start saying like, well, I could put LEDs in this, I could put a sound system in there, like you can
Yeah.
get way off the rails.
And just so far, oh, you're taking a drink. That reminds me, I got this drink out for me, but no. No, but seeing what you've done so far, like even if that was it and you paint it like that already is like a sick way of doing it.
Oh yeah.
Um, and the other thing is I'm working on the video for the Metal Robot Spirits Wound War review. That has to be the most complicated Gunpla, even though it's not Gunpla, but collectible I've ever gotten because it is like you transform it, but I think they had to be really they went for form over function when it comes to transforming it. They wanted to make
Oh
sure
yeah.
it looked like what it's supposed to look like in every stage, and it means transforming it is insane. They might as well made it where you take it apart and then put it back together because I'm literally turning everything like 180 And
Oh, yeah.
and
It reminds me of those, like, Transformers, like, the third-party Transformers toys where, you'll have, like,
yeah.
there's, like, little parts that are maybe the width of these tweezers that you're just kinda like, "Okay, delicately flip that around and
Yeah. Yeah.
make sure that the pins lock into place, otherwise the whole thing's gonna come apart."
Yeah, and
Um,
it's some things which I think I've learned it's due to durability so it doesn't break, but some things that you connect together are only just kinda loosely in place.
right.
And I used to think, "Why do they do that?" But with all the falls I've had recently, like, I get it. Something will fall and it will just come apart instead of break off,
Yeah.
which I appreciate that. Every time a V-fin or a commander antenna falls off of a helmet, I'm like, "Oh, at least that wasn't something that broke off."
Right. I
Yeah.
recently, my Totus Ritter fell,
Ooh.
and I was looking at it because I was trying to compare it to the Bound Dock.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was like, "Oh, well, what's the Totus Ritter, command horn look like?" And I looked at it, and I saw that it was kind of, like, bent backwards, and I was like, "Huh, that's a funny shape for a command horn." And then I was like, "Oh, no, it's broken." And it was
Oh. Oh, no. Would that be an easy fix for you?
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
repaired it,
Oh,
pretty easily, but
already did. Oh,
But
sweet.
but still, it's funny, I would never would have even noticed. I thought that that was just the design of it, that it, like, went out and bent back. I
No, that happens sometimes. Like, the most embarrassing thing for me was when I got that Robot Spirits Psycho Zaku, the
Yeah,
Saikamu Zaku, and it was missing the front thing, and I remember even in the review, I'm like, "This looks like a variation." Like, I don't
it's kinda
know,
goofy, yeah.
and I until, like, later, I don't know if either someone pointed it out or I realized, I was like, "Wait a minute, it's missing the snout." Luckily, they sent me a whole new head, so
That's
that
so
was awesome,
cool.
but it and that even happened, I think, when I first got the gun cannon, how he has that, oh, what is it? Isn't there like a thing he has? Like, maybe it's on the back of the head or something, and I remember it
Yeah.
was gone, but I didn't realize it. Or maybe it was the front part that goes above the visor, I think.
That's a very unique point about Robot Spirits is that, like, Bandai will hook you up with replacement parts for a Robot Spirits. Good luck if you have a runner that's missing, like a high grade kit that's missing a piece from a runner. Good luck trying to get a replacement for that because
Ah, okay, interesting. Yeah, I almost feel like anytime I break a Gunpla piece, it's like my life is over. Because you, like, spent money on this, you're working on it, and then you're like, "What?" Although, lately, I feel like it's been, through you and getting into the hobby, it's been easy to learn how to, like, fix things, to replace
yeah,
things.
and that's one of the things that I loved talking about with Diggs yesterday is he was like be adventurous. Go ahead and screw up. It's you can always fix a Gunpla. That's
You know what? That gives me an idea. Either a video you do or a live stream where you have multiple pieces that you have maybe spares that are common breaks and how you fix them.
that's a
You
good
would do
idea. I
you
might
would do
have
good
to
at that.
intentionally drop
Yeah.
some.
Yeah. Or
No, I mean you guys have seen when Adam and I stream together. I'm always like, oh
something
well,
will
I
break.
glued my finger to that foot.
Oh.
Like I guess it's
No, that's great. So yeah, let me end there. The only other Gundam thing I got into is because I'm near done After War X, and
oh
like
yeah, finally.
so I finally got to another episode of it, and it's funny how again, and I'm gonna have to talk about this in the review. Like, it's really just a good show, even if it's doesn't do anything super interesting. I don't know
Yeah.
how to explain it. It's just like there's nothing about it that would be offensive or weird or be like, okay, that took me out of everything. It seems to just be a good, consistent show.
Yeah, do you think that there's like a fine line when it comes to, television and movies where you almost have to have something that is I don't know if offensive is the right term, but something that stands out. Like you have to really put your foot down about something in order to either be great or be terrible. And it's a fine line, obviously, between the two. And some people will interpret your work one way or the other. But yeah, what do you
I
think about that?
No, I agree with you, and I think about that sometimes because it's like if I have an idea for a show or movie, it's like, well, what about this would stand out? And but sometimes the answer is something we've talked about, where it's like, oh, there's always someone new to that concept, so you never know.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe I can still add something interesting, to it, which I think. And it's interesting because it's like what I feel like the issue with Star Wars is. Yet when new Gundam come out, it's like Hathaway is still super different from what came before. In terms of what the angle is. Oh,
Yeah.
it's the one of the main character's son is a terrorist. Like that's a huge angle, and so it makes me think, oh, I can't wait for the next one. How is he going to confront his father, or is there going to, so like there's
Yeah.
um yeah, and then even watch I didn't watch the latest Ahsoka, but I did
Oh,
watch the
but
one
you are
before.
caught up to 6.
Yeah, I saw where
Okay.
Thrawn emerged.
Yeah.
That was pretty sick. Like, I think they did a good job for the first time in a while with Star Wars of making someone seem as formidable as Darth Vader. How they introduced them, and then you're like, "Oh, crap, what's this guy up to?"
Right. Yeah.
Especially how the actor played him.
Right. Well, and he's an experienced Thrawn
Yeah,
because
he did the voice in
he did the
Rebels.
voice. So,
Yeah, and
you
he
know.
played, like, a Putin-like, I think, in, House of Cards.
Oh, I
S
never saw him in that.
Yeah, yeah, so
So yeah, I mean that's fantastic. When you have an actor that can deliver that type of presence, it's always great. So
and kinda go back to what you're saying, like, the thing that I think what Ahsoka I'm now understanding it's doing that I feel like is that sort of new interesting thing, and it's a concept I just like the idea of in general. It's kinda like, "Oh, wow, there's another galaxy that is reachable, and
yeah,
what is there? What does it look like? How esoteric is it?" And, like, just think of humanity if, like, we on Mars just discovered some random stone with an inscription on it. Like, we'd be like, "Oh my god, what does this mean?" And what if it involves something that we can't comprehend, and that would be our downfall, like,
yeah,
I
yeah. I
feel like
mean,
that's what
there's
Thrawn is trying to.
so many stories that I think kind of try to capture that
Yeah.
into the unknown experience. Mass Effect does a good job of doing that.
Oh,
And I appreciate
okay.
that storytelling technique because, as we talked about before, one of the things that I think didn't really click with me when watching Ahsoka is that, I wasn't familiar with a lot of the characters from Rebels, and so, their presence didn't really resonate with me. But when you start introducing things where there's just enough familiarity with the story of Star Wars, but then you're setting it in another galaxy, it's like you have just an inkling of grounding, but the palette is completely open. You're not beholden to older characters or older storylines that, you know, I think that a lot of people use them as crutches and then they also end up being baggage, right? Like we see that in Gundam all the time where it's nice to have an Amuro and Char story, but then when there's not or when there's a story that doesn't have Amuro and Char in it, it's freedom because you have
Yeah.
a blank slate that you can create a real story off of. So I
And
don't
you
know.
know what's interesting? I think with Gundam, it kind of respects the world, how it changes through the UC timeline, whereas in Star Wars, they seem to be like, well, oh, we'll just, have the Emperor come back, which I'm not against, but I just think the way they did it, you want to have like a cohesive narrative of what's happening. Like Gundam will establish something before it goes too far in the future and changes everything up. And if it goes in the future, it's like with Unicorn, it has a background. Okay, how did it get here?
Yeah.
Whereas with the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, it's kind of like, well, we were interested in the world after the downfall of the Emperor and the Empire, but he just jumped to the Emperor coming back with the First
Yeah.
Order, and I think that's what tripped people up. It's like, "Oh, what is this new world we all could have been in?" And I think Mando, and Ahsoka's trying to do that,
Yeah.
but
Bridge the gap between the two.
they are too much acting like the Empire still exists, which it still could, but I don't think they're really doubling down on what would really a post-Empire be like, and how much could it
Yeah.
be like Zeta, where
That
yeah,
honestly, there was that one episode of Ahsoka that really I thought was fantastic, where you had like, sleeper Imperial agents, because that's what it would be like, right? Is
yeah,
things aren't perfect, and then you have people that used to be loyal to an empire that doesn't exist anymore. So
Yeah, it'd
but
be
but they don't wield the type of political power that
yeah.
you see, like, with the First Order in Star Wars, and, so, yeah, I mean, yeah, similarly, I think that, you have that same sort of thing with Xeon, right? Like, after the fall of Xeon and the One-Year War, it's the Xeon remnants that are the threat, not
Yeah.
there's not this oppressive force that's taking over, unless you count the Titans, but
Well, yeah, and that's what would be neat if there was the New Republic had a group that was based off the Rebel Alliance that were still like, yeah, we want to have a military, and
Right,
it's still a Rebel Alliance that the Republic's like, we have to stop the Rebel Alliance. They're
right.
trying to build up an army again. They're like, no, we have to be careful of Imperial remnants. And then yeah, let's like the New Republic starts hunting down the rebels, so then they start teaming up with the Imperial remnants to I don't know, like, I
I mean,
think
you
that
could
would
have a
have been
lot of
more
fun with it,
interesting. Yeah.
and I think that that's another thing that, Gundam respects its own franchise in a way. I just recently watched a YouTube short about, why George Lucas insisted that only Obi-Wan and Yoda were the survivors of Order 66, and why it was so important that most of the Jedi were dead, is that
Mm.
it takes away the weight of Luke Skywalker and Leia being the last hope if there's hundreds of Jedi that survived Order 66 and are running around, you know, doing
Yeah,
Ahsoka things.
that's you were exactly on point with that, the kind of respecting the world it was trying to make as seeming, what am I trying to say? Like, the risk that the characters were involved with. It's like it almost like it minimized that. To where
Yeah,
it's like, well, if something happened to Luke, there's Kanan, or no, I think he was dead by that time, or whatever.
or
Other,
Cal Kestis
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah, all these guys, Star Killer, shoot,
Yeah,
well, and maybe we're giving Gundam a little too much credit because let's face it, with every new OVA or side story that comes out, they always introduce a new Gundam. Just
that's
like
true.
here we have Requiem for Vengeance doing the same thing.
You know what? That is true, and I almost feel like that would make more sense in a Star Wars world because it's the whole galaxy,
Yeah,
and so yeah, that's a good thing to still think of at the end. Which I guess though people usually stay for Gundam for the Gundams, for the mobile suits. In
yeah,
Star Wars, I don't think there is a central why do people watch Star Wars? For me, it's the space combat,
yeah.
but it's become fantasy, like about force users. Even though I think that stuff's cool, it turned more into that being the anchor instead of which if you think about it, it's awesome how even though the new type powers were such a big deal in early Gundam, that's never been the anchor.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
And it's interesting because, I think that there is value to the characters in Gundam, and, you can almost write off any additional Gundams that they make up to fill the gaps. It's like, well, yeah, but those aren't like that's not Amuro, right? Like,
yeah,
you think because you and I have talked about the idea of like the ground Gundams being this like propaganda tool, like we're just gonna
yeah,
slap a
that's
V
true.
fin on a GM and try to scare the Xeon. And it's like, well, yeah, but it's not Amuro and it's not the
That's a good
Gundam.
point. It's
It's a
like yeah, it's almost like Amuro was an anchor for the Gundam to be an anchor. And
yeah.
throughout, yeah, people want those mobile suits, but story-wise, it's able to differentiate itself.
It would
Yeah.
be like the same, I think, if and I'm surprised that you don't see this a lot more often in Star Wars, but people wielding lightsabers who are not Jedi or Sith that,
Yeah,
just
good point.
grab lightsaber like, the lightsaber as a tool and as a symbolic, you know, token in the Star Wars universe is similar to the Gundam, right? If you see
Yeah,
someone with a lightsaber, you're thinking that guy probably is scary and can do some dangerous stuff with that.
yeah.
How many just loose lightsabers were collected after Order 66? I would if I were a bounty hunter, I'd be swinging a lightsaber around even if I knew nothing about the Force just as a threat, you know?
Yeah, you would think there could be some, like, group of Imperials, stormtroopers, and I know they had one in a comic, but, like, you would think large scale with lightsabers.
Yeah.
And they're not trained in it, so maybe they're accidentally killing themselves sometimes, but it's supposed to be if you come across a Jedi, because there's so many we killed, here's lightsabers you guys could use. That's good. Good stuff. Um, Okay, so next, I want to talk about that the thing we mentioned at the beginning, like the financial advice thing. So,
Yeah.
and I want to come at it as I'm even like when I see new things come out, and actually, let me just share that real quick. Um, like you contributed to my Providence Fund with that, $5 super chat. But then there's like this a metal build camphor, which is amazing because there's not many like popular UC metal builds. Like I think they do have the RX-78 2. They do have the Zaku 2 from Cuckoo's Doan's Island, but they don't have like a GM or um anything else that I would expect from like UC, like a Zeta also, or they like I have the F91, I have the Crossbone. So it's really cool that we got a camphor because then I'd love an Alex to be made. But like, as much as I want this, it's almost like I get to this point with my collecting where I'm like, but I shouldn't buy this. I'm sure this is going to be like $300 or right under. Um, and I guess it even depends where everyone is in their life. And then I'll watch these YouTube channels about people trying to be financially smarter, saving money. Then there's that saving for retirement, which I mean, I have, like a 401k at a job, but other than that, like I'm not really
I mean,
doing
are
anything
guys like you
outside.
and I gonna be able to retire? I feel like they're just gonna work us till we're dead.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I'm curious, like so for me, I've gone the past couple months where I've actually slowed down my purchases because one, I have a backlog. Two, I am lucky enough that I sometimes get sent stuff. But I'm also like wondering, and it's weird because I feel like there's also because I'm running out of space, it's easy for me to be like, well, I won't buy that because I don't have the space. But then it's like, well, if I don't have the space, why don't I sell things that can be used to then pay for new things, which I know some people do. I know Tom, our supporter, he's big into robot spirits. He tends to sell to buy new ones. What about you? Have you thought about the way you, I guess, spend money in your hobby?
Yeah,
Especially, and I hate to cut you off, but I think it's good in your perspective because you have a child that
well,
wasn't
I
a
mean,
big
so do
part.
you.
Well, yeah, but I think it just recently changed for you. Like, I've
Yeah,
had my kids for a while, and I think I'm at a place now where I can more comfortably feel good about dropping a couple hundred on a
that's
robot.
true. Yeah, I definitely collected high grades much more enthusiastically, years ago, and where I would try to complete sets, right? Like I would
Yeah.
get an Alex, and then I would get a Camphor, and I would get a Zaku Kai because I wanted to have the set, right? But then as I got more into the customization aspect of it and that side of the hobby, it became less about just having the thing and having something that I wanted to do with the thing.
Mm.
And I think that, you see a lot of, like you mentioned, there's financial advice channels where people will say, don't buy things, buy experiences.
Oh, yeah.
That they say like, instead of spending money on a big expensive TV, like go on a trip because the trip is going to be more valuable to you when you're older than having a nice thing. And I think that that's kind of the direction that I've gone with my hobbies where, rather than buy a ton of kits, I'll buy one kit that I'm going to pour my heart and soul into, that I'm going to, put LEDs on, that I'm going to paint, that I'm going to customize and do something with. And that's part of the journey that I really enjoy sharing, on YouTube. But of course, that said, similar to Diggs, I have downsized in other areas of my life where
Yeah.
maybe I don't spend as much money on video games because I have less time to play them. Or, I recently sold one of my guitars because, I,
Oh, okay.
I don't play music as often as I used to. And so, I think that that's another thing is, and I think you've alluded to that as well, where you've kind of scaled back on collecting Star Wars
Yeah.
in favor of collecting Gundam.
That's right.
I still think that, it breaks my heart that Jabba's palace is not gonna have a home
Nope.
at the
Yeah.
Blue
And you know what?
household.
It's funny you bring that up because I don't regret it. Sometimes I'll have this regret of
Yeah.
like, oh, I skipped out on that, but I feel good about it. So
Yeah, and I think, Diggs touched on it yesterday as well. There's the FOMO aspect. Like, if I don't
Yeah.
get it now, then
Yes.
I'm never going to get it. And uh, I'll be honest with you, investing in a 3D printer has sort of changed that attitude for me, because if there's something that I want, I can always, it's not going to be perfect. Like, I'm not going to be able
Yeah.
to print a high grade model kit, but I could always print a Gundam miniature, and there's 3D models everywhere. And
And
so,
doing
Diggs
that
mentioned having like a backlog of STL files.
STLs.
Same thing is like, and that takes up less room in your house, but maybe more room on your hard drive. So
But no, also, I think sometimes too, spending on collectibles is if you're in a position where you're just scrolling or you're bored. So, like with a 3D printer, sometimes you might be engaged with that and not prone to be like maybe scrolling or finding a sale or a deal. Like I've had to remove a bunch of toy YouTubers, toy photography YouTubers, and and on Instagram and Twitter, and I actually don't go on those as much anyway, just to avoid that. But that would
yeah.
sometimes get me to buy something. Like you've heard of the Fwoosh, right?
No, I'm not
Okay,
familiar with that.
they're a pretty big toy reviewer, and they also make action figures. And they have a
Okay,
Ninja
cool.
Scroll action figure that they're producing, and you only have like a few more days to buy it. And I'm like, oh, I should get it then. But it's like, do I really need it? And
Right.
that's and so in to kind of go back, the video game thing's interesting because I used to have a gigantic video game collection. I would always buy everything physical. I mean, I had a whole room. I have probably pictures of video I need to share sometime. And back in 2019, I think it was 2018 or 2019, I sold it all. And it was to pay off bills because I wanted to be able to buy a house for the families. And it put us in the position to do that. And I think
Yeah.
maybe because I saw that end result, it makes it easier for me to sell things or to part with things because I could see, you know, and so then, but the thing is, I still love video games, but I feel like it's very easy to save money on video game stuff now. Like, and I don't know how moral this is because I've heard people talk about it in the past, but I'll look at sites like G2A or CD Keys to see if like a game is cheaper.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I probably wouldn't buy it, you know? And, sometimes I'll look on there and I'll see, oh, this is a game I wouldn't buy, but it's like, 40% cheaper. And then I'll grab it. And that's got, and I think sometimes you have to think of those things like, because I know that, oh, I'm going to be buying this expensive Gundam, but I want to play this game. So I'll try to find this game cheaper.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
think,
And this is a topic that kind of came up on my Discord the other day, and I know it's a question that you get very often, where it's, people asking like, well, where can I watch Gundam? And it's
oh,
like,
yeah.
you know, or because those are the two most popular questions, is what order of Gundam do I watch,
Yeah.
and
And
where can I
where?
watch it?
Yeah.
And I'm a big proponent of physical media and like supporting the content that you're going to consume. And it's always, people don't want to buy DVDs or Blu-rays. They
Yeah.
want to watch it for free, but they don't want to pirate it. And it's like you
Yeah.
can't have all three, right? So like it's kind of like the design triangle, where it's like cheap, fast, or good. You can only pick two.
Yeah.
Usually you can only get
Right.
one, but you can pick two. You can't have all three. And so it's like, if you want to watch Gundam for free, you're going to have to pirate it and maybe pay a little bit of your soul for it, because then,
Yeah.
there's the moral aspect of that. If you want to watch it and pay for it, then, obviously that's a there's going to be a cost associated with it. And so, yeah, I mean, you're talking about, obviously, like, looking for discount video games, and it's like there's a cost for everything. Either it's gonna cost you time, it's gonna cost you money, or it's gonna
Yeah.
cost you a little bit of your soul. And it's just like, what are you willing to pay more of?
You know what? The time thing is a good point because I think that when I'm playing a video game, like I'm gonna like Starfield. I was like, I could tell this is gonna require a lot of time and a lot of the mechanics are a little boring to me. So I'm gonna pass on Starfield. I and
Yeah,
um even Cyberpunk, I've actually 4 times gone back to that game, but like I end up hitting a wall where I'm like, I don't want to spend my time with this as much as
right.
it seems cool. But that new Double Dragon Gaiden, I've completely 100% achievement it on Steam, and now I'm doing it on Xbox. Like, that's like a game that I would spend so much time with. And
Yeah.
that was interesting. I got it, and this is where I got it as a birthday gift from my brother on Xbox, and I liked it so much that I bought it again on Steam, but I went to G2A and it was $10 cheaper. It's
Yeah.
so it's like one singular person almost supporting the product twice in a way. I don't know, because I don't really know too, too much on the background of G2A, but those keys had to come from somewhere, you know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so and then you brought up the Star Wars thing because that is true. Where I decided, okay, I'm going to stop collecting these Star Wars figures, and now I still have a whole lot of the vintage collections. Like, should I sell those? Although I kind of like them, I just going to stop collecting the new ones. I'm just going to keep that in the back of my mind for now. But between looking, for cheap video games and not buying the Star Wars, it has given me more of my play money budget for Gundams.
Yeah, for
But even
sure.
then, sometimes I'm like, okay, how can I maximize this? And so I'll go to Ami Ami, go to pre-owned. Oh, here's a pre-owned one that I want. But like, when it comes to the creator aspect too, it's like I'm wanting to get these things because I like to talk about it. It's weird. It's like a chicken and the egg. I got into
Yeah.
Gundam, thought it was so cool to talk about. It's like, oh, I might as well make videos. But then now I'm making videos. Am I then going, oh, I need to buy more to then make videos?
Yeah, and so how much as a content creator do you feel a sense of responsibility for what type of influence you have on your audience? Because I look at guys like Mecha Gaikotsu or
Yeah.
other big hobby creators that they just do kit reviews. They're
Mhm.
not doing any custom builds. They're not really showing off anything that they've done. They're just showing off things that they've either purchased or were sent. And it's like, are they contributing to that FOMO that is getting more
Yeah.
people to, spend money that they don't have, right? Like, I'm not worried about Gaikotsu. I'm not worried about Zaku Aurelius, and I don't mean to like call out names. I'm not trying to like,
Yeah.
throw
No, I
them under the
understand.
bus. They're great guys and they do a
Yep.
lot for the hobby. But,
Of course.
is there I know I personally feel a sense of responsibility whenever I put a video out where I'm like, you know, don't go and buy things that you can't afford, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to show you cool things to do with your Gunpla and hopefully even save money. Like, I'm like, don't buy the expensive paints, do these cheaper paints instead. You can find cheaper alternatives to the things that you're doing. And yeah, I mean, it's in a certain sense, we're all kind of feeding the beast to an extent, right?
You brought up a good point, because yeah, when I was talking about how I stopped following some toy reviewers because it gets me to want to buy it, I stopped watching Mecha Gotsu and Zacharelius for that same reason. Like, I'll seek them out about a specific one, but I can't keep up with them because I'll be like, "Oh, that one looks cool, I'll buy it. Oh, that one looks cool, I'll buy it." When naturally, organically, I wasn't interested in it. And I but I feel like those things need to exist where there are creators that are documenting
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
you know?
Because that stuff does, you're right, it does need to exist in a vacuum because and I'm sure that there are people that have talked themselves out of buying kits because they watched a kit review, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's tough. I don't know what the right answer is.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good ongoing discussion to have every once in a while to kind of keep top of mind, like, are you being responsible with your finances? And I don't think also part of this is I don't think it's right to say someone is not financially responsible if they decide they don't want to save money but spend it on stuff. Because part of me thinks we have this one life
Yeah,
and we get a lot of joy from things that maybe joy can't be found elsewhere because there's a lot of hard stuff we have to deal with in life. And so,
it's
like,
true.
I, and uh,
Hey,
yeah, it's hard to say.
but to
Yeah,
play devil's advocate, and like, you can't take your Gundam kits with you to the grave.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it goes back to that idea of like, buy the experience, don't buy the product.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that goes back to what you were saying before, how a lot of financial advisors, they will say the whole thing about spending your money on experiences and not things. But like you've been able to prove, especially through your live streams, is there are some pretty cool experiences to be had with what you can do with Gunpla, kind of the point of Gunpla, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I mean, and Diggs mentioned that yesterday as well, is it's like, if just building the kit is what makes you happy, then don't think of it as buying a kit because you want the physical thing. You're buying it because you want to engage in building it. I think a lot of people are guilty of having a big backlog, myself included, because the building experience isn't really what they want. They want the artifact. They want the collectible, right?
yeah.
And like I said, I'm guilty of it as well. I think sometimes, man, I've got that Dendrobium Orcus sitting in my garage waiting to be built, and I'm like, why don't I build it? Is it because I really don't enjoy the building process? I enjoy
You
the
just like that you have it.
right.
That is
So
interesting. I think it's a couple things. I think there's our minds probably work different when there's something we want versus than an experience of something or the journey through,
yeah,
like building something. And sometimes we just have to be in the right space. And I think that even is like for video games. Like I've been taking this GBO2 break because I played it like every day for like months. And I think I had to kind of like slow down a bit.
well, and
Um,
when you're both on Steam and on
I
PS5,
know.
PS5, it's like,
Playing 2 games. Yeah.
yeah,
It's crazy. And yeah, I think even with Gunpla that happens sometimes where people will, like, not build for a little bit. Like, I've actually even slowed down my building. So because I was building a whole lot and then just recently slowed down because there's multiple factors. There's space, time, and money. And
yeah,
so it's like, out of those, what should I be focusing on? And then there's that other psychological element of I could store things. But,
yeah.
like, sometimes I feel bad that it's just sitting there.
I know. I just watched Toy Story with my daughter, the other
Oh,
day, and I'm like, I don't wanna put these guys in a box and not touch them," and, like, it's I'm sure that, like, my Zazaby's getting ready to throw the Zeta Gundam off the Argama and be like, you're in my spot."
yeah, that's interesting because it's just thinking of other things I have stored. I have, like, the, X-Men figures for Marvel Legends and Mafex, a mix of those because I love the X-Men. I have
Yeah.
the original MMPR figures, or not the original, but, like,
Oh, wow.
MMPR figures of the Hasbro,
Yeah.
um, and those are all stored. I have the new that's Kickstarter Spawn. I have, like, Mezco Blade. I have the SH Figure Arts Ninja Turtles, but they're all in storage. But I have a lot of these things I love,
Interesting.
but it's like I guess I could make room for those and then put up some the Gundam, but at the same time, like then there's that other aspect. I'm in my room, this office sometimes, and it's like sometimes there's too much.
Yeah. Can
I
it can get overwhelming.
I feel like I'm in a growing phase of figuring that out.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Like, and it could be space. Like sometimes, I'm like, oh, we need a bigger house, which it's a decent sized house. I would say it's more on the smaller end of a family home, but
Yeah.
at the same time, sometimes I feel like, well, I don't want to put myself in a position where then I've given myself more room to just collect more things without really a goal.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so it's funny you mentioned that it's like time, space, and money because
yeah,
what's funny is you can trade any of those things for the other except for time. So you can trade time for money and
yeah,
you can trade the money for space. You can even trade money or you can trade space for money if you sell your house, right?
yeah,
And downsize your space. But one thing you can't get back is time
yeah,
necessarily. I mean, you could argue like, okay, well, if I pay someone else to build my kits for me, then that saves my time, but it cost me money, right?
right. And that experience is lost. That so within that time, space, and money, there are things and experiences.
Yeah.
So what it's like, yeah, you're trading that time and money for the thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And I kind of I'm not big on labels, but I like the idea of this kind of labeling these things and thinking about, like, in any situation, my time, space, and money. Okay, what's more valuable to me? Uh, Almost like we were. What was the other thing we were just talking about that had three
Oh,
things?
like, whether it's free or whether it
Yeah,
costs money. Yeah.
yeah, something like that. Like, there's always the things you've got to think of, because I think what I'm trying to figure out, and this will be my journey, maybe across the next ever long live streams, is like, where do I want to focus spending my money on the hobby? That's what I'm
Right.
trying to figure out, because I buy the Blu-rays. I've been buying the vinyls recently. So,
And that's something that's similar to and I think, Jam Axe mentioned it in chat is, if you only put money towards the things that you care about, like, for instance, like I buy the Blu-rays, but I only bought, you know, Zeta Gundam, Double Zeta.
mm,
I only bought the series that I'm not about to go buy Gundam X on Blu-ray, for
oh, right,
instance.
right.
Only invest in the things that have meaning and value to you, then that's a really good form of impulse control. But again, to your status as a content creator, like, you do kind of have a responsibility, whether we like it or not, to, I guess, contribute to the hobby, contribute to the space, contribute to this franchise that we love so much.
Yeah,
Um
that responsibility part is interesting, and I think you even brought this up. It's like, as I'm doing my videos and talking about these things, it's like I almost don't want to give off, because I could see little younger kids seeing this with content creators, but like, oh, that guy just buys a bunch of Gundam. I'm just gonna buy a bunch of Gundam and spend all my money on it. And it's like, no, I'm actually trying to be careful, and think about it. It's just the presentation makes it seem like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that it's good that we're having this conversation because, again, I don't think that people are really honest enough about these types of things.
Right. Right.
And you mentioned earlier about wisdom coming with age. I once heard someone say something that wisdom doesn't come with age; it comes from asking yourself questions
Hmm.
and being honest in the answers for those questions.
Yeah.
And I think that that's exactly what you're touching on, and that's exactly what you and I are doing. Is we're asking ourselves, is this really what I want, or am I doing it as a band-aid over
Yeah.
something that I don't know yet? Is this something that I would really spend my time on? And a lot of people kind of decouple the idea of money from time, and it's like, think about it in terms of like the time that you spent working to earn that money, right? Like, let's say if you make $15 an hour and you buy a $45 kit, you just traded 3 hours of your life for
Hmm.
a Gundam.
That's
When you put it
interesting.
in terms of that, then all of a sudden these things make a lot of sense. And you're like, wait, how many hours of my life do I have to commit in order to get a Providence Gundam metal build, right? Like,
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, how often do people do this? And I don't think it's often, where you do break down your salary hourly based as you're paying for necessities. Look at, okay, what's the necessity cost versus the hours I have to put in to pay for that,
yeah,
even if it's a necessity. And I think that could help with things, because I think most people don't have a budget in the first place. But to go even
yeah.
further and relate that to what you're worth, you know, hourly or something. Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
again, there are ways to kind of increase your value in that sense. Like, I brought up the hourly wage of like 15 bucks an hour, but you can actually put time towards making yourself more valuable to where you are worth $30 an hour. You can so there's yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting, and I think this just goes to show, like, as people grow up, they're not necessarily properly equipped to answer those questions, unless we talk about age. Maybe they had parents or other mentors that kind of help instill that into them. Because, and I
Definitely.
think a lot of reasons I think of this stuff, because why does it matter? Well, I think it's because as I'm raising my kids, sometimes I'm like, well, I'm doing this. I don't think I would want my kids to pick up on how I am doing this. So I'm sort of questioning and structuring my hobby as, I do this stuff, because it sparked from yesterday. So I'm back into playing Call of Duty. They've got the new season 6 battle pass, and it has Spawn, which is amazing. Like, you could be Spawn in Call of Duty.
Now,
Like,
did Keith David voice him?
I think so because I hear him talk and it sounds like Keith David, but I'm like, there's no way he did it. Did he? Is that what
I have no
I'm gonna
idea,
have to
but
look that up because it could be Michael Jai White from
that's
the
true too.
but I don't know.
He's not up to much these days, is he?
Well, he's coming out with that new Cowboy Black or something like that, where it's like
Oh,
a sequel to
sweet.
Black Dynamite.
Yeah,
I think it comes out this month. It
that's
might be this
awesome.
week. But um so I remember like I wanted to buy the battle pass, and then my son was going to use his money to do it,
No,
but he was trying to save his money for something else. And I'm like, you are trying to save your money for something else, so I appreciate that, but you do want this battle pass. So it's like, well, help us out and be good for this next week, and we'll see if maybe I'll buy it for you. But I'm trying to think like I don't want to buy him just everything all the time, and
right.
I appreciate that he wants to save his money. So
Yeah, because most kids don't have that mentality, so the fact that he's already thinking like that is a good thing,
yeah,
but you don't want it to kind of squash his passions so
yeah,
and I think that that's a good, lesson, like you said,
yep,
if you maybe pick up 1 or 2 extra chores this week, then you can earn a little bit of extra
yeah.
money, like you said, it's all about trading one for the other.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think that's a good place to end it on. I think not only for kids doing chores, but even if you tell yourself, "Hey, yeah, I will buy this once I complete doing some work around the house, apartment that needs to be done," or how about I just pay off this credit card real quick first, and then I'll buy the thing. I think there's little things you could do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for all that joined. It was a lot of fun to talk about this.
Yeah, we
Again, with
got
the
deep.
yeah, no, exactly. I love how this happens with our shows where we can relate our hobby into aspects of life that and kind of give advice and stuff like that. So, um, again, yeah, thanks for all that's watching. Check the links in the description for all the supporters of the channel that are at a certain tier. Also, Steven's Midnight Hatter page. We do our Wednesday live
Hey,
streams. We have a lot of fun with that.
thank you, thank you.
And for everyone else, have a good weekend. We'll talk later.